He didn't just beat his opponents, he destroyed them. Nigel Benn, the Dark Destroyer, a man who walked into the ring not looking for a fight, but looking for a finish. Pound for pound, there are very few fighters in boxing history who carried the kind of raw, savage power that Benn brought every single night. But which wins defined him? Which performances made even the hardest men in the sport stop and stare? Today, we're counting down the top 5 greatest wins of Nigel Benn's career. The knockouts, the wars, the moments that cemented his legacy as one of Britain's most ferocious fighters of all time. Trust me, you do not want to miss number 1. Let's get into it. Number 5, 3rd October 1992, Nigel Benn versus Mauro Galvano. And this one was about so much more than just a win. This was Nigel Benn becoming a 2-weight world champion, on foreign soil, in front of a hostile crowd, in the heart of Italy. Benn was challenging for the WBC Super-Middleweight title, and from the first bell, he made his intentions absolutely clear. No feeling out process, no tactical patience. He went straight for Galvano, banging hooks to the body, cutting off the ring, and forcing the champion onto the back foot immediately. Galvano tried everything to survive. He held, he hit on the brake, he did whatever he could to slow Benn down, but Benn wasn't in the mood. Blood appeared on Galvano's eyebrow in the second round, and from that moment, you could feel it was only a matter of time. Then came the moment that nearly derailed the whole night. Galvano bundled Benn through the ropes in the third. The crowd erupted, but referee Joe Cortez waved it off. No knockdown. And Benn came back even angrier. By the end of the third, Galvano's cut was so severe he couldn't come off his stool for round 4. The fight was stopped. Benn was world champion. But then, chaos. The Italian crowd and officials tried to strip the title from him on a technicality. Wild scenes. Benn and his camp going crazy. Eventually, sanity prevailed, and the belt stayed where it belonged, around the waist of the Dark Destroyer. Winning a world title in enemy territory, becoming a 2-weight champion, and nearly having it snatched away. Number 4, 23rd May 1992. Nigel Benn versus Tuilani Sugarboy Malinga. And this one is fascinating, because this wasn't just a win. This was a warning sign that Benn almost missed entirely. Malinga was a seriously underrated fighter. Slick, smart, a brilliant counterpuncher with a sharp jab, and the kind of awkward style that gave big punchers nightmares. And on this night, at the National Indoor Arena in Birmingham, he gave Benn absolute hell. From the opening bell, Malinga wasn't intimidated. He used his jab beautifully, moved well, and landed heavy right hands that genuinely rocked Benn at points during the fight. Many ringside observers felt Malinga was doing enough to take the decision. Even Malinga himself was convinced he'd done enough. After the final bell, he said, "I won the fight, definitely. I couldn't believe it when they said I lost." And honestly, he had a point. The fight was tight, razor thin. Referee Paul Thomas scored it 98 to 97.5 in Benn's favor, one of the smallest margins you'll ever see in professional boxing. Benn knew he'd been in a scrap. Afterwards, he admitted he'd taken Malinga too lightly, said it was back to the drawing board, and even called for a rematch in South Africa. That rematch did eventually happen in 1996, and Malinga got his revenge, winning by split decision and taking the WBC title from him in one of boxing's great upsets. But here in 1992, Benn scraped through. And the reason this makes the top 5 is because of who Malinga was, a future world champion, a man who arguably edged the fight, and Benn still found a way to get his hand raised. Sometimes the closest wins tell you more about a fighter's heart than the easy nights ever could. Number 3, 29th April 1990, Nigel Benn versus Doug DeWitt for the WBO Middleweight title in Atlantic City, away from home, in enemy territory, against a battle-hardened champion. And this is the night Nigel Benn became a world champion for the very first time. The context matters here. Benn was coming off the only loss of his career, stopped by Michael Watson in 6 rounds the previous year. The critics had questions. Did he have a chin? Did he have the stamina? Could he handle adversity at world level? DeWitt was confident. He was the champion, he was experienced, and he promised the younger, less seasoned Benn would be found out. And early on, it looked like he might be right. DeWitt put Benn down in the second round with a left hand, and for a moment, every doubt about Nigel Benn came flooding back. But here's what separated Ben from ordinary fighters. He got up, he reset, and then he went to work. DeWitt had a famous chin, an anvil, they called it, and he needed every bit of it as Ben began unloading left hooks to the head, round after round, wearing the champion down. By the 8th, DeWitt was marked up, exhausted, and running on empty. Ben unleashed hell. A left hook dropped DeWitt along the ropes. A right uppercut put him down again. Then a chopping right followed by 2 big lefts sent him crashing to the canvas for the 3rd time. 3 knockdowns. Fight stopped. 44 seconds into the 8th round. Nigel Benn was a world champion. Britain's first middleweight world champion in a decade. Away from home. After being knocked down. After being written off. And if you needed any more proof of how much he'd put into that performance, he'd broken his hand on DeWitt's head during the fight. Didn't matter. Nothing was stopping him that night. Number 2. August 18th, 1990. Nigel Benn versus Iran Barkley for the WBO Middleweight title. And if you want to understand what made Nigel Benn so terrifying in his prime, this is the fight you show people. Barkley was no pushover. This was a man who had stopped Thomas Hearns in 3 rounds. A brutal, dangerous puncher who had shared the ring with Roberto Duran and Michael Nunn. He came into this fight looking to get back on track, and he had the power to hurt anyone on the planet. But Ben didn't care. The opening bell rang, and within 20 seconds, Barkley was on the canvas. 20 seconds. Ben came out like a man possessed, unloaded a combination that stunned Barkley instantly, and followed it up with a left hook that put him down before the crowd had even settled into their seats. Barkley got up, because that's what Barkley did, but Ben kept coming, wave after wave of power shots, relentless pressure, that trademark dark destroyer intensity that made it almost impossible to think clearly, let alone fight back. Barkley did manage to hurt Ben at one point, catching him on the ropes and making him wobble. And for a brief moment, you wondered if the momentum might shift. But Ben weathered it, reset, and went back to work. Down went Barkley for the 2nd time, then the 3rd. 3 knockdowns, the 3 knockdown rule in effect, and referee Carlos Padilla had seen enough. Fight over. Ben wins by TKO. The atmosphere was electric. 2 elite middleweights, both with something to prove, and Ben had just dismantled one of the most dangerous men in the division in under a round. This wasn't just a defense of his WBO title. It was a statement, a coming-of-age moment, a reminder to the entire middleweight division that Nigel Benn was on a completely different level when that switch flicked on. Number 1. 25th February 1995. Nigel Benn versus Gerald McClellan. And if you only ever watch one Nigel Benn fight in your life, this is the one. This is the fight that defines everything he was as a warrior. But before we get into it, it's important to acknowledge what happened after the final bell. Gerald McClellan suffered catastrophic brain damage that night. He is blind, has severe hearing and memory problems, and has lived with the consequences of this fight every single day since. This was boxing at its most brutal, and that context should never be forgotten. McClellan came in as a heavy favorite, and why wouldn't he be? His previous 3 fights had all ended in knockout victories. He was widely considered one of the most dangerous punchers on the planet. Ben, the WBC Super-Middleweight champion, was expected by many to be just another name on McClellan's highlight reel. Within 35 seconds of the opening bell, it looked exactly like that was going to happen. McClellan hit Ben so hard, he knocked him clean out of the ring. Out of the ring. Inside the first minute. Most fighters don't come back from that. Most fighters don't have to. But Ben hauled himself back in, beat the count, and refused to buckle. What followed over the next 9 rounds was one of the most savage, breathtaking, heartbreaking exchanges in the history of professional boxing. Back and forth. Both men taking and giving punishment that would have stopped ordinary fighters in their tracks. McClellan knocked Ben down again in the 8th. Ben came back. By the 9th, an accidental headbutt appeared to significantly affect McClellan, though nobody knew the full extent of what was happening inside his head at that point. Then came the 10th round. McClellan had never fought past the 8th round in his entire career, and it showed. Ben landed a right hand that dropped McClellan to 1 knee. He got up at 7. The fight continued, then another right hand, and McClellan went down to 1 knee again. This time, he didn't beat the count. Fight over. Ben wins by 10th round knockout, but the celebrations were short-lived. McClellan walked back to his corner, collapsed, and told his trainer he felt like there was water running inside his head. He was rushed to the Royal London Hospital, underwent emergency brain surgery, and spent 2 weeks in a coma. Benn himself collapsed from exhaustion in his dressing room that same night. Before he was released the following morning, he went and shook McClellan's hand and apologized. That moment says everything about the respect these two men had for each other. This fight is number one, not just because of the drama, the knockdowns, the sheer refusal of Nigel Benn to stay beaten, but because of what it cost both men. Benn dug deeper than most human beings ever will, against one of the most dangerous fighters of his generation, and came out on the other side a champion. This was Nigel Benn at his absolute peak. This was the Dark Destroyer at his finest, and this will never be forgotten.